8 weeks ago, I shared that I was starting the search for Scratch, an experiment to see if I can build myself into a Scratch golfer, and this is what I've learned so far. I'm currently a 7.8 handicap, and if I'm honest, I'm struggling to play to it when I've got a qualifying card in my hand. Since starting the search for Scratch, I've played in 3 qualifying competitions, mainly mixed because I'm trying my best to play off the yellow tee, so I want to play in the mixed qualifying comps, which is when I think the yellow tees are at their true yardage and of their true challenge. And of those 3 qualifying rounds, I'm averaging playing to about 9.7. Not ideal for the search for Scratch, but as counterintuitive as this might sound, I actually don't mind, because my purpose behind playing in those comps wasn't to cut my handicap. I know, I will need to cut my handicap on the search for Scratch, but it was actually to work on my mental game, because after cutting my handicap from 34 to 9 in a year, I piled a lot of pressure on myself when it came to playing in comps, and I just noticed more of a fear building. When I would go out and I'd put pressure on myself to shoot a certain score, and I'd feel really disappointed if I didn't do it, or I'd feel worried that I wasn't sort of living up to those expectations of the scores that I should be scoring. And I needed to work on this. I needed to free myself of the fear of playing golf with a qualifying card in my hand. And so that's been my priority. Over the last 3 rounds, I've gone out there really with the quest to work on my mental game. And I think I've made quite a lot of progress, which I'm really happy with. So although the score isn't where I would want it to be, of course I would love to be playing 2 shots under my handicap rather than over, I'm actually really happy with the progress that I've made on the mental side of my game. Because when it comes to getting better at golf, I think there's 2 things that we can focus on: the low-hanging fruit and the limiting factors. The low-hanging fruit, they're the quickish wins that we can focus on, those places where we're leaking shots on the course. Maybe it's the long putts left short, or the bunker shots left in the sand or thinned on through, or those 6-foot knee knockers that we just let slide on by. To me, when I look at my low-hanging fruit, it's where I know that if I was to dedicate a decent practice session or few to that one area, I would make improvements the next time I played. But then we've got our limiting factors, and this is what I've been hitting up against, because I think the limiting factors in our game are what can block us from breaking through to that next level, really getting through to breaking those boundaries of scores, whether it's breaking 100, 90 or 80, or wanting to shoot consistently what we hope to, maybe under our handicap. And for me, the biggest limiting factor has been my mind, my mental game when playing, which is why I wanted to focus so much on entering those qualifying comps, not with the purpose of cutting my handicap, although that would have been lovely, more for the purpose of building my bandwidth for playing well and bringing out my best golf when I've got a card in my hand. And alongside this, another limiting factor that you know I've been working on is my swing. Because I think although my swing got me to single figures, I do believe it will block me when it comes to getting to Scratch. I think I've got quite a few tendencies, as you know, those rolly wrists, which I've been working on, but also more my impact position is something that I've been realising more and more, as not only as I've been filming on the course, but also filming front on the range. And I think that's where my leaky, out to the right misses have been coming in. Because another reason that I'm quite happy, oddly, with playing to 2 over of my current handicaps, I'm playing to about 9.7 on average in these 3 qualifying comps, is because I've actually not been hitting many greens. With those leaky shots in there and the work that I need to do on my swing and my ball striking, it's been putting a lot of pressure, in a good way, to practice my short game and my putting. And when that's come off, it's saved me. But when it hasn't, it's meant that I've had certain holes that might unravel a little bit. And again, that quest to play in these comps, yes, it would have been ideal to cut my handicap, but for me at the moment, it's about building the muscle, building the mental muscle of playing well, or at least playing with a card in my hand and feeling that pressure, trying to calm that pressure and let go of those expectations, but also learn what are my patterns when I've got a card in my hand, when I'm under that little bit of pressure or a lot of pressure that I might put on myself, what happens in my swing, in my game, what comes to life on the course when I've got a card in my hand. And so interestingly, over these 3 competition rounds, there's been 3 things that have stood out to me, and I wanted to share what I've learned with you. Something I've noticed is that over the 18 holes, I'll typically leak most of my shots over 3. And I don't think that's too bad, 3 of the 18 holes, but it's clearly a place where I've got work to do. And when I look at why I've been leaking those shots over those 3 holes, what happened in those 3, they're also sort of dotted about. They're really a block of 3 bad holes. I notice that they come in a dip of concentration. And I think that dip in concentration leads to some not so great decision making. So as an example, I recently had it in one of the qualifying competitions where I had such a good run going, and then we get to the 12th here at West Surrey, a par 3, back pin off the yellow tees. I took my 7-iron, and in that little dip, in that moment of maybe thinking, oh, hello, we've only got, a few holes left to go here, or quite a few, but, a chunk of holes left to go here before we're done and we've got a good run going. When my mind focused on that, rather than the hole at hand, my decision making slipped. So I grabbed my 7-iron, and it's a back pin, and it would have been bang on my 7-iron. And as we were standing on the tee, we had to let other people tee off. So I was standing there, the wind picked up, wind with. So not only was I taking the club for the back pin, but then it was wind with, and I just noticed that I went with it. I carried on. I didn't pause and sort of check my decision making, see if I maybe needed to factor in the conditions, the wind, maybe club down. And I also didn't stick to my golden rule, which is just to take the trouble out of play, because what I could have done and should have done on that hole was just take enough club to carry the front bunkers, get on the green, 2-putt, move on. But no, we went for the pin and it hit the back, bounced off. And then on a par 3 where you don't get shots, it's quite scrambly to try and save yourself. And so that's an example of a hole where, again, in that dip of decision making or dip of concentration, my decision making didn't help me. And so my goal the next time that I'm playing with a card in my hand is to catch myself. If I notice my mind wandering, getting ahead of myself or focusing too much on a hole that's been and not on the hole at hand, I'm going to do my best to catch myself in that moment and go through a checklist, really ask myself, what are the conditions? Are we just taking the trouble out of play? Go through that routine to stay in the zone rather than risk slipping out of it and making decisions that might unravel my score. The next observation, the next learning that I noticed is that when I would tally my score as I go, and I would let my mind, and I've really done my best not to do this over time because I did it a lot on that quest to get down to single figures. I would go out knowing what I needed to shoot, what I was scoring, where I was at the halfway point, what I needed to get back, or try and just par in to steady the score. I was focused so much on what the score was because I was focused on my handicap. I'm purely just scoring what I needed to cut my handicap, get to single figures and achieve the goal. This time, I want to focus more on the process, on the shots and surrendering to the score, because I've noticed that when I do that, when I can let go of the score and not worry about it, not even be calculating it or tallying it as I go, I score better. And so that's something I'm going to work on too. Again, catching myself in that moment of if I notice that I'm starting to tally up, hello, we're a little bit over here, or we need to get this back, or hello, we're on for a good one. I want to really focus on the shot at hand, on the hole at hand, and do my best to just let go of that score and not think about it, not calculate it until we're coming off the 18th and we're putting putter in the bag. And learning number 3 of my 3 learnings so far on the search for scratch, especially from playing in these qualifying competitions and looking at what happens to my game, my mind, my swing under that pressure. The last thing is a positive and something to make progress with. The positive is that I noticed that I've got a lot better at bouncing back. I did a lot of work, especially over the winter. I really worked on my bounce back ability. And the positive is that that muscle is working. When I have one of my 3 not so great holes, I can bounce back after. And that's why they're almost not a streak. They're sort of a little bit peppered throughout the round, these not so great holes. And I'm happy with that. That is a big step forward for me when it comes to really bouncing back after a not great shot or a not great hole, because previous Jess would have unraveled. I would have had that not great hole, and that not great hole would have rippled to the rest of the round. So that's the positive. But the area to make progress is now on keeping calm when I've got a good streak going. So it's building that muscle of closing out the round. And the interesting thing here as well, going back to our 3 of the 18 not so great holes where I'm leaking the most shots, is they typically happen after a birdie or a run of pars. And this was really interesting to me because in the last qualifier that I played in, I remember specifically when a not great hole happened. I had a birdie on the 7th hole, and I think in that buzz, in that excitement, grabbed my driver onto the 8th tee into the woods. Provisional. And we're playing 3 off the tee. And I just noticed the rushing, that excitement of, hello, we've got a birdie, right, let's get onto the next tee, let's keep this run going. I know now that not only do I need to work on bouncing back, I need to work on staying calm as well so that we can close out a good round, rather than let it slip through our fingers because we maybe rush or skip our process or make a decision, again in that dip of concentration, focusing more on the excitement of what's happened rather than the hole that we've got at hand.